Phil.
He played this one.
Bad.
He played this one. A little slower. They were more careful. He knows what he's talking about. Yeah, that's terrific. You should. Okay. Shir hamahalot esayin el hecharim mehayin yavo hezri hezri mehim Adonai Oser shamayim v'haaretz, al yiten lamot raglecha, al yanum shomrecha. Hinei lo yanum v'lo yishan, shomer Yisrael, Adonai shomerecha, Adonai tzilcha, aliyat yeminecha, yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, veyareach balayla, Adonai ishmorecha mikol ra, ishmoret nafshecha, Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha, meyata ve'ad olam.
We gather together today as a dear family and friends of Adele P. Jones. As we mourn her loss, must also celebrate the full, rich life she led. Death has taken our beloved Adele. Friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there's lamentation. In their tears, there's loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For her love that united us in life, and which death cannot sever. For her companionship, which we shared along life's path, and which still continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of her heart and her mind, which brought us joy and happiness, and now become a precious heritage of the Spirit. For all these and more, God, we give you our praise. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'nai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people were well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us. Yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, and there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai natan, God you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all was good and enduring in her life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Proverbs 31. Eshet chayo mi imsar, rekok mi mikra. A woman of valor who can find. She's more precious than fine pearls. Her husband trusts in her, and so he lacks nothing. She does him good, never harm, all the days of her life. She perceives that her labor is rewarding. Her candle burns on into the night. She reaches out to those in need and extends her hand to the poor. She is clothed in strength and dignity, and she faces the future cheerfully. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her lips. Her children rise up and bless her. They sing her praises. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you excel them all. She's achieved success, who has lived well, laughed often, and loved much, who has gained the respect of intelligent men and the love of little children, who has filled her niche and accomplished her task, who has left the world better than she found it, whether by an improved poppy, a perfect poem, or a rescued soul, who has never lacked appreciation of earth's beauty or failed to express it, who has always looked for the best in others and given the best she had, whose life was an inspiration, whose memory a benediction. Amen. Adonai ro'i lo echsar, bina desha yarbitzeni, omei menachot yanachaleni. Please join me now in the familiar words of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters, and restoreth my soul. He guides me in straight paths, even for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The Baal Shem Tov, the Hasidic Rebbe, once observed there are three ways we mourn. The first is with tears, the second is with silence, and the third is with song. We mourn someone truly beloved, we experience all three. Tears at first, then silence as our grief settles more deeply, and finally song as we're able to celebrate the memories we hold deep in our hearts. So this is a time for tears as we say our final goodbyes to Adele. We'll each remember Adele in our own way. Mark, Ellen and Fred, Richard and Randy, you will all remember Adele as your beloved mother. Jeff and Lisa, Eric and Lauren, Courtney and Sean, Rebecca and Alex and Sam. You will all remember Adele as a devoted grandmother, and she was a dear step-grandmother to Maddie, Beth, Kathy, Bobby, and Charlie. And Adele was an adoring great-grandmother to Aiden, Eli, Wyatt, Eloise, Sloan, Miles, and Kalos. Throughout her life, Adele was a loving wife to Harold and a caring sister to Herbert. Adele was born here in Cleveland on June 12, 1930, to Ethel and Louis Protus. Adele attended Miles Standish Junior High and then graduated from Heights High. Adele's friend convinced her to go to a Halloween party, and there she was introduced to Harold. Adele came home from the party and told her parents she met a fantastic guy. When they asked his name, she responded, Harold Jones, and the color ran from their faces. They said, Jones, that's not a Jewish name. And she said, wait till you see his face. He's Jewish. Harold and Adele were married when she was just 19 years old on August 21st, 1949. Rabbi Cohen officiated at the Wade Park Manor. Adele grew up at Park Synagogue and remained a member her entire life. Adele worked briefly as a receptionist while Harold was in the Navy, and then they bought a bungalow on Talmadge Drive in South Euclid with his GI Bill. Harold built on and upstairs. Soon, Mark, Ellen, and Richard were born, and Harold and Adele moved. They built a house on Charney Road in University Heights. They spent some time living with Adele's parents until it was finished in January of 1957. And then in 1966, they built their home on Cardington in Beechwood. Adele was a stay-at-home mom and was always there when her children came home from school. Ellen loved that her mom was always hamisha and warm. Adele had many allergies to fish and fowl, so the Jones family diet consisted of meat and potatoes, rib roast, brisket, and when you went out to dinner, Adele loved her ribs or steaks. But Adele was known for her wonderful desserts. She liked to bake. You will fondly remember her cheesecake, honey cake, and chocolate brownies with frosting. Adele also enjoyed knitting and crocheting and doing needlepoint. Ellen remembers how her mother made them matching mother-daughter dresses, and Adele knitted beautiful sweaters for Randy. Adele was gifted and could make complicated tops and jackets. And also, if you had a difficult stain on your clothes, you took it to Adele and she would know how to get it out. In her later years, Adele enjoyed reading and watching old movies. Randy remembers soon after she and Richard were married, Harold came to her and said, "Your mother-in-law would be so happy if you called her Mom." So Randy did from that day on. Adele was always wonderful to her. Adele was a proud, lifelong member of Hadassah and Ort. She volunteered in the gift shop at Menorah Park. Adele also enjoyed helping her brother Herbie at his pharmacy, Beechwood Apothecary at Laplace. Adele worked at the makeup counter. Adele and Harold grew tomatoes together, and they liked to play cards at friends' houses. Adele played bridge and canasta. Adele and Harold loved to travel. They spent 40 winters in Delray Beach, Florida, and their house in Florida became a second home to their children and grandchildren. The family would all meet there over winter break and sometimes for Passover. Adele created wonderful memories for all her grandchildren. Adele was an early riser, and you could always count her being up and ready for breakfast with the coffee on when you came into the kitchen. Adele would be sitting there doing her crossword puzzle. When Richard and Randy came to Florida when their kids were little, Adele and Harold would take Rebecca and Sam for 2 nights and tell Richard and Randy to go somewhere themselves. This thrilled everyone all around. Adele became very close with Randy's younger sister, Karen, who lived near them in Florida. Adele liked to say that she helped Karen find a husband. 34 years ago, Karen put a personal ad in the paper, and many people responded. She didn't know how to decide, so Karen brought all the letters to Adele, and they read through them, and Adele helped her decide who to follow up on. As the oldest grandchild by a number of years, Jeff shared a special relationship with his grandmother. She felt like a second mom. Jeff remembers spending every weekend with his grandparents when his siblings were born. And Lisa has been close with Adele since she and Jeff married 20 years ago. Lisa spoke to Adele almost daily. Adele knew Lisa's work schedule, and if Lisa didn't call accordingly, Adele would call to check that nothing was wrong. Eric realizes that he has gone into the food and beverage industry because he remembers how his grandmother made him feel happy and comforted through her cooking. It was an act of love. Eric enjoyed spending his birthdays with his grandma and papa in Florida, and they often went to Tony Wu's, where their family picture hung on the wall. Courtney could always rely on her grandmother. Twice Adele saved her. In 5th grade, Courtney had an asthma attack, and her mom was not reachable. Adele rushed to the nurse's office with her inhaler and instructed the nurse to give Courtney coffee until she arrived. And a number of years later, Courtney got into a little bit of trouble while her parents were out of town. Her grandmother picked her up at the police station and didn't make a big deal about it. Courtney lived with Adele during her first semester of law school. They enjoyed watching Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune together and going to Maggiano's for dinner once a week. Courtney enjoyed getting to see her grandmother in this new light. Rebecca and Sam grew up in Los Angeles, so they only got to see their grandparents a few times a year, but they always looked forward to the visits with much anticipation. They had the run of the house in Florida and loved all the toys and snacks. They remember how delighted their grandparents were to have them visit. Rebecca enjoyed going to delis for lunch where she would order her favorite matzo ball soup and then going shopping with her grandmother. Her grandmother was always such a good listener, and they talked about things. And Sam remembers his grandmother's comforting presence and demeanor, and the warm memories of being at Adele's house for Hanukkah with her electric menorah. Sam enjoyed going on a Caribbean cruise with his family and hearing his grandmother's stories from her childhood. You all felt very fortunate to spend quality time with your grandmother. Adele took wonderful care of Harold when he was ill. They shared 61 wonderful years together. After Harold's death, Adele went to Florida for a few years, but then decided to stay in Cleveland to be near family and friends. The family was all recently together just in October to celebrate Eli's bar mitzvah. Adele had the opportunity to meet her youngest great-grandchild, Kai, for the first time. It meant the world to her to have you all together. And so today may be a time for tears. We are saddened by the loss of Adele, but we learn much from her, especially how to love and care for one another. Let these tears serve to strengthen and uphold you as a family. There's a story in our tradition about a rabbi who once passed an old woman planting trees. "Old woman," he called, "why are you planting those trees? You'll never live to see them blossom." But the woman replied, "My ancestors planted trees, not for themselves, but for us, that we might enjoy their shade and their fruit. I do the same for all those who will come after me." Adele planted an orchard for each one of us, an orchard filled with devotion and with love, and these will always be here for us. We must be grateful that we're able to share in Adele's life. Tomorrow there'll be fewer tears, more silence. As the Baal Shem Tov noted, it will be a time of pondering, a time for contemplation. Adele will become a greater part of our characters and our beings as we integrate the memories and the values she taught us into our own selves. But finally there'll come a time for song. The time will come when we can celebrate Adele. We recall all that we learned from her and how she touched each of our lives. May she rest in peace. Zecher Sidacha Livracha. May the memory of Adele Jones be a blessing. And let us all say amen. Amen. I'd now like to invite Richard and then Mark to come share some personal words about their mother.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. Your comments were so warm and inspiring. I'll keep my comments very brief. Our mother really didn't like people making a big fuss over her. First and foremost, our mother was a great mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. Family always came first. Whether when I was a small child or an adult, she always made time for me to talk about anything. We spent many, many hours just talking about our lives, everything going on, anything that came to mind. The rabbi mentioned she got up early in the morning. When I would visit, I happened also to be a very early riser. So whatever time it was, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, we just sit over coffee and talk for an hour or so. My mother took an immediate liking to my wife, Randy, as the rabbi indicated, when we met over 44 years ago. She was an amazing mother-in-law, and the two of them got along great. Of course, I think my mother always liked my wife better than me, but it's a terrific relationship. She embraced all of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren with so much love and affection. She also loved when Ellen and Jeffrey and Eric brought their small dogs over to visit. Little dogs running all around, and my mother's, she loved it. They jump in her lap. It's great. As noted, my mother and father were married for over 60 years. As a reflection of her strength and love for our father, when he had Alzheimer's and became very, very ill, my mother was a full-time caregiver. She spent so much energy, time helping my father, which made it so much easier for my father as well as the rest of the family. Her resolve and perseverance helped make my father's last years much more tolerable. My mother showed incredible resilience after my father's passing, handling day-to-day matters that were previously handled by my father. She really stepped up. One of the things my mother cared about most was having the family get together. Although the nurses at hospice told us on Thursday that she only had a couple of hours left, my mother hung in there until Monday. Now, I believe she did that so there'd be more time for the family to be together, and she would have appreciated the family being together to celebrate her life. My mother had a great life, surrounded by wonderful friends and a very close family who loved her very much. Ellen and Fred, Jeff and Lisa, Courtney and Sean here in Cleveland were always here for her, as well as so many others, Hortense, Marilyn, Navarre, and again, so many others. We will miss you, Mom.
So my mother was born on June 12th, so her parents gave her the obvious middle name, June. She was a very sickly child with many allergies and asthma. She missed a lot of school and could never take gym class, but she overcame the adversities and graduated Heights High with all her great friends like Marilyn, Jessie, Renee, Eileen, and others. After high school, she went to the workforce and got a job at some company and as some type of an office position. The boss told her, sit down behind this desk. We'll see you later. So she sat there and nothing happened and nobody came in and she didn't know what she was supposed to do. Then later on the boss came in and said, you're doing a great job. Keep at it. But primarily, she was a homemaker. She'd always have milk and cookies for us when we came home from school. She'd be watching all the game shows when we got home, like The Price is Right, Let's Make a Deal, The Match Game, Password, and of course Mike Douglas tell us to go out and play. But make sure you get good grades. She'd take us shopping for clothes at Tops and Zayers and Uncle Bill's and Mr. Junior, and for shoes at Meyer Miller, Clarence Cuppy-Cone. Every night, she'd have a dinner cooked for us as soon as Dad got home from work. And she and Dad had all kinds of great friends for many, many years. And she loved talking for hours, especially with her sister-in-law, Jeannie. She loved dogs, but because of her allergies, we could never have one. One of my favorite stories was when I was living in Lyndhurst temporarily in the late 70s, early 80s. I brought a steak bone home that she had saved for my dog, Wally. I gave it to Wally, and he gobbled it up, and I dialed my mom's number and gave Wally the phone, and he howled to her, and she said, "You're welcome, darling, you're welcome." And later on, in her later years, she was thrilled always when Ellen would bring Wendell over to visit. That made her day. She would always tell me about that. Since I lived in New York, I made an agreement with her that the best time to call her would be every Sunday between 9 and 9:30. However, I found if I called her before 9:15, she would always say, "Why are you calling so early? You got really up early today." You know, I'd be up at maybe 7:38, but I'd wait till after 9 to call her. So if I called after 9:15, she goes, "I was getting worried. Why are you calling so late?" So I was called exactly 9:15, and her favorite topic was the weather. She would be looking out the window and giving me a minute-to-minute update on what the temperature was and what the precipitation was. And I would say, "But Mom, you're not going outside anywhere. You're just inside." But didn't matter, you know. She said, "Oh, it went up a degree." So the main thing she was concerned about when I talked to her was that I was making a living. That's all that really mattered to her. You know, are you getting jobs? Or, you know, she wanted to make sure I wasn't going to starve to death. Mom used to sew and knit and crochet, and I still have several of her Afghans. And every evening when I'm curled up on the couch with my girlfriend watching Breaking Bad or a movie or a football game, we have Mom's Afghans draped over us, keeping us warm. My parents stayed together for over 60 years through thick and thin, raised 3 kids who all turned out to be pretty much okay, and we're blessed by many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So they accomplished all one could ask for in a family. That to me is a success story. And one last thing, or almost last, in my mom's last years, she met a caretaker named Hortense, who we call Horty. To us, she became her best buddy. She was so lucky to have her by her side. And finally, my sister Ellen was unbelievable for her devotion and caring of Mom, being the only one of us kids who lived in Cleveland. Our whole family owes her a debt of gratitude for making Mom's final days the best they could be.
Thank you for your beautiful words. And now Jeff and Courtney will share some thoughts from Adele's grandchildren.
I'll be really brief. I just wanted to put some thoughts together, some words together. So my relationship with my grandmother was very special. We were very close. Growing up, she was like a second mom to me. The rabbi kind of mentioned that. She was a very young grandmother for me, and we were able to spend a lot of time together before Courtney and Eric came along. So yes, I did spend a lot of weekends and a lot of time. I think Mom dumped me off on Grandma quite a bit, but Grandma was very happy to have me. My mom always reminds me of this one story when I was little. I was on an elevator with my grandmother, and this other woman must have been on, and she says, "Hey, little boy, you have to be careful. You need to hold your mommy's hand." And my grandmother was sitting there beaming, because here she is. Somebody thinks that she's my mom. And I quickly, I stopped that right in its tracks because I said, "That's not my mommy. That's my grandma." And so Grandma was instantly deflated. But, she had a couple of moments. So, yeah, she was a young grandma, and we spent a lot of time together. And as I got older, I had my own family. I saw her on a weekly basis, if not more. I'd come over throughout the week for meals. I would, early on, she would cook for me. As time goes by, after, my grandfather wasn't around, tables would turn. I would come over, grill for her, cook for her. We'd all have family dinners. And I'd have to come around quite a bit to fix a lot of things around the house. I was the fix-it guy. So whether it was, changing light bulbs or the TV, Horty knows. The remote control constantly, but I think she used that also as an excuse to want to see me too. But I was fortunate that she had the opportunity to be part of my children's lives too. She was able to see both my children become bar mitzvahed. There's not that many great-grandmothers that get that opportunity, so we're very fortunate. And we're also very fortunate, Lisa, my wife, was very close with her as well. She spent a lot of time on calls with Grandma, as the rabbi mentioned, when Lisa would be leaving work or just check-ins. And Lisa would spend a lot of time every day on the call getting the updates on the weather or what was going on in the neighborhood. Just by looking outside, Grandma, would be like the neighborhood watch. Or just to find out, what store she went to, just general keep-up stuff. So it was nice to have, that relationship with my wife as well. And so I'll always cherish, all the memories that myself and my family have had with her over the years.
Poet Nikita Gill wrote that grandmothers are not a gift to be taken lightly. So many lose them before they are old enough to know their magic. As Adele's grandchildren, we are deeply grateful that we were able to truly know her magic. There is an archetypical image of the grandmother as a gray-haired woman dressed in pastels who cares for nothing more than her grandkids, who bakes and dotes, who quells and spoils, who stands up for the grandkids when the mean parents try to deprive them of things like sweets and screen time. There is an even more specific image of the Jewish grandma, who is all of that, plus one tough cookie with chutzpah and opinions to spare. As a grandmother and a great-grandmother, Grandma Adele, or Grandma Adele, as Aidan coined, was all these things. A great listener, endlessly impressed by each of our accomplishments, well-stocked with Swiss cake rolls and cheese crackers, generous with a Yiddish phrase as she told us to lay down on our kepelas and go schluffy, and complimented our Shana Punams. Grandma's most powerful magic was her consistency. She was a refuge for her grandkids in an ever-changing and uncertain world. When we moved, she stayed. When our lives were turned upside down by the drama of adolescence and our unpredictable bodies and our confusion trying to find our places in the world, our trips to see her and Papa in Florida remained an anchor. When we were with Grandma, we were just children whose grandma would wake up early, make us fresh squeezed orange juice from the oranges on her tree, tell us how wonderful we were, and just be there. Her constant presence and consistent state of grandma-ness was, in fact, had us all under the magical delusion that she would be around forever. Now, we have to face a world without Grandma's physical presence. Without the house we've all gone to regularly for the last 30-something years. Without the phone calls and birthday cards and apple cake. But we are lucky, deeply, eternally lucky, because we came to know our grandma's magic. And as Eloise put it, her heart came to be full of so much love, there just wasn't any more room.
Thank you all for your beautiful words. If you're able, please rise now for El Malay Rachamim.
El Malay Rachamim Shachayna Bamramim Hametzemeno Hanechonam Tachat Kanefei Ashkinam B'mahalot Kedoshim Adhorim Kazohar Varakia Mazgerim Et Nishmat Eida Batleib Shagalach Aleholamaha Beganadan Tehai Menuchata Anabavalvarachamim Astiraiga Beseter Knafach Alehoalamim Vetitzuror Bitzror Haimet Nishamata Adonai Gunachalata Vetanuag Beshalom Al Mishkavam Venamar Amen.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Adele P. Jones, known in our tradition as Ada Bat Lev, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound on the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen. Amen. You may be seated for a few moments. This concludes our service here. We'll proceed from here to Mount Olive Cemetery for burial. And following burial, the Jones family will have some private family time immediately following, and they will be receiving guests for Shiva from 4:30 to 8 p.m. today at Beachmont Country Club. Thank you.
They know who they are. Fred is another one. Sean and Eric.
Fathers, if you'll go with that gentleman there. Fathers, follow me, please. Please rise. Family will follow behind here. Family will just follow right behind, please. The interment will be at the Mount Olive Cemetery. We ask that those who are going to that service, please return directly to your cars. Put on your headlights and your hazard flashes. Thank you for your attendance. Friends, step out this way, please. This way, back to your cars.